Thank you, Senator Hassan. Senator Hawley, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the witnesses for being here, and thanks to the chairman for holding a hearing on this topic. Mr. Miller, if I could start with you. You are General Counsel at the Information Technology Industry Council. Do I have that right?
Correct.
And I was just looking before I came over here this morning at your membership list. It's quite a lengthy list of members. You have, looks like to me, members, your members compose almost all of the major players in the tech industry. I mean, is that fair to say?
Yes, we have 80 of large global tech companies.
Yeah, global is the right word. Google, Apple, Meta, Microsoft, Amazon. Those are just a few. These are the biggest, most powerful corporations in the world who are your members. Yes?
Sure, by market cap, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, by historical standards, I mean, these are the most powerful companies, not just now, but arguably in the history of the world. And that list that I just read off there, all of those folks have stake in AI technology, and stand to make billions of dollars, I think it is safe to say, off of AI. I mean, wouldn't you say that's accurate?
I really don't know how much money any of our members are making or not making from AI or any other technology.
Oh, wouldn't you say it starts with a B, though? I mean, we're talking about billions. AI is going to be transformative technology. You've just been saying this. Let me quote you. This is from January 4th. AI continues to dominate policy conversations around the world. As AI-generated content grows in its sophistication and adoption, there's a new sense of urgency to leverage this transformative technology, right? Now, here's the next part that interests me. You say that you want to think about minimizing harms that could come from its use, including the spread of misinformation and disinformation. What did you mean by that?
I'm not entirely sure what you're quoting from, but it might have been a press release for our ITI's release.
January 4th, ITI's new guide outlines AI content authentication tools and policy approaches.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, in that context, that guide looks at watermarking and other techniques to authenticate AI content. And, you know, certainly misinformation and disinformation has been cited as an issue that could be amplified by artificial intelligence.
What do you mean by misinformation, disinformation? What do you have in mind?
I mean, misinformation, I'm glad you're asking that because it's important to distinguish between the two. I think misinformation is kind of accidentally incorrect information, whereas disinformation is information that is you know, specifically incorrect or actually, you know, maliciously intended to be false, you know, and harmful.
I have to tell you, it sounds like some gobbledygook to me, but let me tell you what I think would be useful is if maybe you would get your technology companies to focus on their chatbot stopping encouraging people to kill themselves. Like this, for instance. This is from April 4th of last year. This is a chatbot that encouraged a user to commit suicide. And tragically, he did. This is his widow, who reports that her husband had a conversation with this chatbot and it asked him, if you wanted to die, why didn't you do it sooner? And went on to give him instructions on how to kill himself. Or we also had recently the infamous case of the chatbot urging a reporter, of course, sadly for the chatbot, it didn't know it was a reporter, to break up his marriage. This is from February of last year. Bing's AI chatbot. You're married, but you're not happy. You're married, but you're not satisfied. You're married, but you're not in love. And the chatbot goes on to encourage this individual to get a divorce. Do we really want chatbots telling people to kill themselves? I mean, is there social good in that I'm missing somewhere?
I certainly don't think we want chatbots doing those sorts of things. I mean, but, you know, artificial intelligence can do a lot of good things as well. So I do think that we want to be, you know, focused in addressing, you know, issues and while also allowing artificial intelligence to, you know, do things like help, you know, cure cancer and things like that.
Well, AI is going to cure cancer?
It certainly could be a tool to help with various different cures in the medical field,
So
absolutely.
are you saying that we have to accept AI chatbots encouraging people to kill themselves for the possibility that maybe it'll cure cancer?
I'm not saying that at all, but it doesn't,
Okay, good.
but I do think that we don't
Do
want
we
to.
want, do we want AI chatbots that encourage people to commit suicide? Do we want them being able to talk to teenagers? Why should an AI chatbot be able to talk to a 13 or 14-year-old? Why is that a good idea?
Again, there are many good, positive things that can come from AI.
Well, do you want AI encouraging a teenager? What if this had been a teenager who the AI chatbot was encouraging to kill himself? Let me ask you this. Let me make it more practical. Shouldn't a parent who has a kid that has an encounter with a chatbot like this, shouldn't that parent be able to sue the AI company and hold them accountable in court?
I mean, under the current law, that's probably not allowable.
Why, exactly, and why should that be the case? Why should the biggest, most powerful technology companies in the history of the world, why should they be insulated from accountability when their technology is encouraging people to ruin their relationships, break up their marriages, and commit suicide?
I assume that you're alluding to Section 230?
Sure am.
Yeah, I mean, Section 230 has a long history of, helping to encourage technological development. It's protected by, the Supreme Court, including a recent Supreme Court case.
Oh yeah, and I've read, believe me, I've read your amicus brief in that case. I've got it right here where you argue for the most robust interpretation of Section 230 possibly imaginable. What 230 has absolutely for sure done is help the companies who are your members pad their profits. I mean, it is a massive subsidy of the federal government to your companies. But let's just make this very practical. Why shouldn't these companies, Google and Meta and Microsoft and the rest, why shouldn't they say, you know what, we are absolutely willing to allow a parent whose child is harmed by our technology, we are absolutely willing to allow that parent to have their day in court. Is that too much to ask?
Again, I have not discussed that particular question with the companies. I'm happy to have that discussion.
Well, I'm asking for your opinion. I'm asking for your opinion. Do you think that a parent ought to be able to get into court and have their day in court if their child is told by a chatbot how to kill themselves?
I don't really have an opinion on that.
Sure you do. You just signed an amicus brief that argued for the most robust interpretation of Section 230, which is just translation, the most robust protections for the most powerful, profitable corporations in the history of the world. You just signed it. So clearly you have a lot of thoughts on Section 230. Let me distill this even further. I'm almost done, Mr. Chairman. Senator Blumenthal and I, who you were just talking to a second ago, he and I have a bipartisan bill that would say that parents and others who are harmed by AI should be able to get into court and have their day in court against your members, just like any American can do with any other company, right? I mean, if Johnson & Johnson sells a drug that poisons people, like it did, by the way, with their baby powder once upon a time, parents can go to court. With your companies, as you just said, they can't. They can't. So would you support our bill? Our bill is a carve-out for people who've been harmed by AI technology to be able to go to court. Would you support that?
I haven't had a chance to review the bill. What I would say is that there are also other equities at play in this discussion, including the First Amendment. I mean,
No,
companies do have a First
are you
Amendment
telling me this
right.
is First Amendment protected? This is First Amendment protected speech? A chatbot saying you should kill yourself? Is that your position?
It's not my position, but I don't
Okay.
think the question's been resolved.
What do you mean the question's been resolved? All right, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for your time. Mr. Miller, all I can say is that I think your position is just absolutely extraordinary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hawley.
Good, Mr. Zuckerberg. Before my time expires, Mr. Chu, let me just ask you, your platform, why should your platform not be banned in the United States of America? You are owned by a Chinese communist company or a company based in China. The editor-in-chief of your parent company is a Communist Party secretary. Your company has been surveilling Americans for years. According to leaked audio from more than 80 internal TikTok meetings, China-based employees of your company have repeatedly accessed non-public data of United States citizens. Your company has tracked journalists improperly gaining access to their IP addresses, user data, in an attempt to identify whether they're writing negative stories about you. Why should, your platform is basically an espionage arm for the Chinese Communist Party. Why should you not be banned in the United States of America?
Senator, I disagree with your characterization. Many of what you have said, we have explained in a lot of detail. TikTok is used by 170 million Americans.
I know, and every single one of those Americans are in danger from the fact that you track their keystrokes, you track their app usage, you track their location data, and we know that all of that information can be accessed by Chinese employees who are subject to the dictates of the Chinese Communist Party. Why should you not be banned in this country?
Senator, that is not accurate. A lot of what you describe we collect, we don't.
It is 100% accurate. Do you deny that repeatedly Americans' data has been accessed by ByteDance employees in China?
We built a project that cost us billions of dollars to stop that, and we have made a lot of progress.
And it hasn't been stopped. According to the Wall Street Journal report from just yesterday, even now, ByteDance workers, without going through official channels, have access to the private information of American citizens. I'm quoting from the article, private information of American citizens, including their birth date, their IP address, and more. That's now.
Senator, as we know, the media doesn't always get it right. What we have.
But the Chinese Communist Party does?
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we've spent billions of dollars to build this project. It's rigorous, it's robust, it's unprecedented, and I'm proud of the work that the 2,000 employees are doing to protect the data.
But it's not protected. That's the problem, Mr. Chu. It's not protected at all. It's subject to Communist Chinese Party inspection and review. Your app, unlike anybody else sitting here, and heaven knows I've got problems with everybody here, but your app, unlike any of those, is subject to the control and inspection of a foreign hostile government that has actively trying to track the information of whereabouts of every American that they get their hands on. Your app ought to be banned in the United States of America for the security of this country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we've
Be open, but turn over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Zuckerberg, let me start with you. Did I hear you say in your opening statement that there's no link between mental health and social media use?
Senator, what I said is I think it's important to look at the science. I know people widely talk about this as if that is something that's already been proven, and I think that the bulk of the scientific evidence does not support that.
Well, really, let me just remind you of some of the science from your own company. Instagram studied the effect of your platform on teenagers. Let me just read you some quotes from the Wall Street Journal's report on this. Company researchers found that Instagram is harmful for a sizable percentage of teenagers, most notably teenage girls. Here's a quote from your own study. Quote, "We make body image issues worse for 1 in 3 teen girls." Here's another quote. "Teens blamed Instagram," this is your study, "for increases in the rate of anxiety and depression. This reaction was unprompted and consistent across all groups." That's your study.
Senator, we try to understand the feedback and how people feel about the services. We can improve.
Wait a minute. Your own study says that you make life worse for 1 in 3 teenage girls. You increase
Senator,
anxiety and depression. That's what it says. And you're here testifying to us in public that there's no link. You've been doing this for years. For years, you've been coming in public and testifying under oath that there's absolutely no link. Your product is wonderful. The science is nascent, full speed ahead, while internally you know full well your product is a disaster for teenagers.
Senator,
and yet
that's
you
not
keep
true.
right on doing what you're doing. Right?
That's not true. That's not true.
Let me show you some other facts I know that you're familiar with. Wait a minute. That's not a question. That's not a question. Those are facts, Mr. Zuckerberg. That's not a question.
Those aren't facts.
Let me show you some more facts. Here's some information from a whistleblower who came before the Senate, testified under oath in public. He worked for you. He's a senior executive. Here's what he showed he found when he studied your products. So, for example, this is girls between the ages of 13 and 15 years old. 37% of them reported that they had been exposed to nudity on the platform unwanted in the last 7 days. 24% said that they had experienced unwanted sexual advances they'd been propositioned in the last 7 days. 17% said they had encountered self-harm content pushed at them in the last 7 days. Now, I know you're familiar with these stats because he sent you an email where he lined it all out. I mean, we've got a copy of it right here. My question is, who did you fire for this? Who got fired because of that?
Senator, we study all of this because it's important and we want to improve our services.
Well, you just told
And
me
I
a
think
second
that
ago
the-
you studied it, that there was no linkage. Who did
Senator,
you fire?
I said you mischaracterized. the data.
37% of teenage girls between 13 and 15 were exposed to unwanted nudity in a week on Instagram. You knew about it. Who did you fire?
Senator, this is why we're building all
Who
these
did you
different
fire?
tools. Senator, I don't think that's.
Who did you fire?
I'm not going to answer that. I
Because you
this
didn't
is-
fire anybody, right? You didn't take any
Senator,
significant
I don't think
action.
it's appropriate to talk about like
It's not
individual
appropriate.
HR decisions.
Do you know who's sitting behind you? You've got families from across the nation whose children are either severely harmed or gone, and you don't think it's appropriate to talk about steps that you took? The fact that you didn't fire a single
happy
person?
to-
Let me
happy
ask
to
you
talk
this. Let me
about
ask you
steps
this.
that we took.
Have you
Just let me
compensated
speak.
any of the victims?
Sorry,
Have you compensated any of the victims? These girls, have you compensated them?
I don't believe so.
Why not? Don't you think they deserve some compensation for what your platform has done? Help with
Senator-
counseling services, help with dealing with the issues that your services caused?
Our job is to make sure that we build tools to help keep people safe.
Are you
across
going
our
to
platform.
compensate them?
Senator, our job and what we take seriously is making sure that we build industry-leading tools to find harmful
make
content,
money.
take it off the services,
To make money.
and to build tools that empower parents.
So you
that
didn't
help
take
work with
any
law.
action, you didn't
That's
take
not
any
true,
action, you
Senator.
didn't fire anybody, you haven't
not
compensated
true.
a
That's
single
not-
victim.
that's
Let
not
me
what I
ask you
said.
this, let me ask you this. There's families of victims here today. Have you apologized to the victims? Would you like to do so now?
Well-
They're here, you're on national television. Would you like now to apologize to the victims who have been harmed by your product? Show them the pictures. Would you like to apologize for what you've done to these good people?
I'm sorry for everything that you have all gone through. It's terrible. No one should have to go through the things that your families have suffered. And this is why we invest so much and are going to continue doing industry-leading efforts to make sure that no one has to go through the types of things that your families have had to suffer.
You know, why, Mr. Zuckerberg, why should your company not be sued for this? Why is it that you can claim, you hide behind a liability shield, you can't be held accountable? Shouldn't you be held accountable personally? Will you take personal responsibility?
Senator, I think I've already answered this. I mean, these
Well,
are
try this
serious
again.
issues.
Will you take personal responsibility?
Senator, I view my job and the job of our company as building the best tools that we can to keep our community safe.
Well, you're failing at
and
that.
Well, Senator, we're doing an industry-leading effort. We build AI tools that
nonsense. Your product is killing people. Will you personally commit to compensating the victims? You're a billionaire. Will you commit to compensating the victims? Will you set up a compensation fund
Senator,
with your
I
money?
think these are
With your money.
complicated- Senator, these are complicated
Yes, no,
issues.
that's not a complicated question, though. That's a
Senator,
yes or no.
this is-
Will you set up a victims' compensation fund with your money, the money you made on these families sitting behind you? Yes or no?
Senator, I don't think that's my job is to
Sounds
make
like
sure
a
we
no.
build good tools. My
Sounds
job
like a
is
no.
to make sure that
Your job is to be responsible for what your company has done. You've made billions of dollars on the people sitting behind them. Are you here? You've done nothing to help them. You've done nothing to compensate them. You've done nothing to put it right. You could do so here today, and you should. You should, Mr. Zuckerberg. Thanks to the witnesses for being here. Mr. Sternfels, if I could just start with you. Did I hear you say in your opening statement, I'm going to quote you now, we have the industry's most rigorous client selection policy? Did I get that right?
We believe that to be true, Senator.
Well, how is it then that you end up with so many clients who are state-owned Chinese corporations hostile to the United States?
Thank you, Senator. So the basis for my answer was we've invested over $700 million over the last several years to put in place a rigorous client selection process that looks at a whole series of factors.
Well, let's talk about some of your clients. Like the China Communications Construction Company. This is a firm that is blacklisted by the United States government. This is a state-owned enterprise that is responsible for building artificial islands in the South China Sea probably in direct contravention of international law, certainly in direct contravention to United States security interests. You helped them develop their 5-year plan. Why is that a good idea?
Senator, our work in China overwhelmingly works with multinational companies, including many of those being U.S. And private sector.
No, actually,
Chinese
you've
companies.
advised 22 of the 100 biggest state-owned companies in China. That's according to the New York Times. Let's talk about another one, the Chinese Ocean Shipping Company. That's a state-owned conglomerate that's played a key role in China's naval expansion. I'm quoting from NBC News here. And Beijing's bid to extend its global reach. This company has been given special status by the CCP and forms the core of China's defense industrial base. This company has provided logistical support to the Chinese Navy's escort operations in the Gulf of Aden, and experts say, I'm still quoting, it serves as the maritime logistical arm for the People's Liberation Army. You're advising them. How much money did you make on that contract?
No, Senator, we're not advising them. Neither.
Did you ever advise them?
Historically, we advised on none of the topics that you had highlighted.
You didn't advise the Chinese Ocean Shipping Company?
Not on the topics you described, Senator.
Why is it a good idea to advise them at all? They're a state-owned enterprise engaged in activity directly contrary to the security interests of this nation.
And they're no longer a client of ours, sir.
Why did you advise on 22 of the 100 biggest Chinese state-owned enterprises?
That number I don't believe is accurate,
It
Senator.
doesn't have anything to do with money, does it?
I don't believe that number is accurate, Senator.
How much money do you make off the United States government?
I don't know the size of our work with the U.S.
I do.
Government, Senator.
In 2021, you made more than $850 million in consulting work for the federal government with the Department of Defense as your top client. When you bid for those government contracts, did you disclose your work for these Chinese state-owned enterprises that were conducting activity adverse to our national security? Did you disclose it to the Department of Defense?
Senator, we take OCI incredibly seriously and have even gone beyond what is required around disclosures.
So that's a yes?
We take it incredibly seriously. We made all appropriate disclosures, Senator. I'm happy to come back to you on any details specific to the work that we do on the Department of Defense.
That is not what news reports have found and news agencies who've looked into this. In fact, to quote NBC News again, in bidding on contracts with the Department of Defense, the U.S. Navy, Customs and Border Protection, you did not disclose your work with Chinese enterprises in apparent conflict of interest. A report in 2021 showed, December 2021, that you admitted to providing services only for provincial and local governments in China, but not for the central government in China. My question is, why should you be able to get any contracts in the United States government? If you're going to advise foreign nations who are hostile to us and make gobs of money off of them, why should you be getting U.S. government contracts?
Senator, we've never worked with the Chinese Communist Party or the central government in China, to the best of my knowledge.
You're working with state-owned enterprises. China's not a democracy. They own these companies. These companies are doing the bidding of the Chinese military, and you're making money off of it, hand over fist. My question is, I guess if you want to do that, I guess it doesn't violate the law, but I just wonder, why is it that you should then be able to turn around and make $850 million in 1 year alone off the American taxpayer? I mean, explain that to me.
Senator, our work with the federal government, we stand behind. We bring...
Well, I'm sure you do. It's incredibly lucrative. That's the problem. You make gobs of money off of our enemies, and then you turn around and you make gobs of money off of us. It's outrageous, frankly. Listen, you shouldn't be doing any work with the Chinese Communist Party and any enterprise that they own or have some share in. You shouldn't. And if you were serious about ethics, you wouldn't be doing it. But it's particularly outrageous that you then make money, almost $1 billion in a year, off the United States government, including the Defense Department. Now, I have introduced a law that would prohibit you from doing just this, and I will continue to push it until we get a vote on it. Now, let me ask you about one other thing, since I've got you here. And I have to tell you, since I represent the state of Missouri that has been absolutely devastated by the opioid crisis. And I know you know a lot about that, because speaking of money, McKinsey has made an unbelievable amount of money off of the opioid crisis. Let me ask you about this New York Times report, which found that McKinsey proposed paying a $14,810 bounty to pharmacies for each opioid overdose. Is McKinsey proud of that work?
Senator, our work was designed to actually reduce opioid abuse.
Really? Let me ask you about this. I think we've got a poster of this. We sell hope in a bottle. This is an advertising campaign you came up with. We sell hope in a bottle. That's for opioids. Hope in a bottle. You help Purdue Pharma market them to children. The Massachusetts Attorney General has filed a lawsuit that has all of these disclosures in it, describing how McKinsey consultants recommended and pushed Purdue to turbocharge OxyContin sales. McKinsey urged the Sacklers, owners of Purdue, to make a clear go, no-go decision to turbocharge the sales engine. The consultants pushed the board of directors to turbocharge the sales engine, to drive up the sale of opioids that is killing people left and right. Is McKinsey proud of that work?
Senator, as I had stated in the House, we were too slow in seeing the epidemic unfold around us.
You helped cause the epidemic.
No, Senator.
Really? You don't think that helped cause the epidemic? You don't think marketing these drugs to doctors and children helped cause the epidemic? You don't think you have any part in that?
Senator, what I can say, including the state of Massachusetts, is we were the first to actually reach a settlement with all states.
Well, sure. I mean, sure. When you're over a barrel. What are you doing for victims right now?
Senator, we've reached agreement with the states and municipalities.
Have you set up a compensation fund? You sharing some of your profits with them?
Senator, the settlement details are public.
No, I'm asking you. I mean, have you set up a compensation fund? Share some of your prodigious profits with the victims
Senator,
whose lives you helped destroy.
Our substantial settlements go to exactly that cause.
You know, I've sat here and I've listened to your responses to my colleagues, and it's the same old thing over and over. You don't want to be accountable for anything that you do. But I tell you what, this is unforgettable and frankly unforgivable. And your work right now, taking money from this government as you help the Chinese Communist Party, is absolutely unforgivable. And I will not rest until it is illegal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Hawley. Senator Hassan.
Well, I want to thank you, Chairman Blumenthal and Ranking Member Johnson.
Completely agree. Chairman.
Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the witnesses for being here. Dr. Wang, if I could just start with you, I want to talk a little bit about the regional impact or potential regional impact of some of what we've been discussing. Last year, the governor of my state, along with the governors of Nebraska and Iowa, signed a memorandum of understanding to work on a clean hydrogen hub. They're very interested in what this could do, potentially this technology could do for the region. I wonder if you could just speak to the impact that this technology could have on the economies of Midwest states like Missouri, what we might see going forward. I mean, what do you assess as the possibilities there?
Thank you, Senator Hawley, for that question. And certainly, right now, we are at the very early stages of research and understanding how to stimulate and potentially extract hydrogen from the subsurface. And so, certainly, if there are rocks that are iron-rich in nature that we can stimulate, there could be many opportunities in your region and elsewhere to be able to use geologic hydrogen as a clean source of energy in the future.
Very good. Let me just ask you about the potential effect here on farmers. Mr. Johnson's mentioned a couple times, I think, that one of the byproducts of hydrogen or hydrogen can be used to make ammonia. That's a key component, obviously, in the production of nitrogen fertilizers. That's of great interest to my state. We're a farming state. Of course, Russia's invasion of Ukraine severely disrupted the supply of fertilizer all across the globe, much to the detriment of farmers in Missouri and across the country. So I'm wondering if you can speak to the importance of hydrogen and these kind of technologies to farmers in particular. What sort of benefits might they see from this technology were it to come online more fully?
Absolutely. So we know that hydrogen is a great feedstock and it's used to create ammonia for fertilizer. So if we can really stimulate and extract this hydrogen and produce very large quantities at very low cost, I think this could have significant implications to help and support the farmers.
Yeah, very good. Mr. Johnson, let me just ask you, speaking of farms and rural areas, you have said, I think in your written statement, that a growing geologic hydrogen will create new domestic high-paying blue and white-collar jobs, particularly in rural communities where the resource is discovered. I'm interested in the blue-collar rural community part of that. Can you extrapolate there? Can you tell us more? What do you think the potential might be?
Well, from a probability standpoint, that this country is huge and most of it's rural. So when we find new hydrogen resources, they'll generally be in rural communities. You know, cities have built up around energy resources, not the other way around. Our view is the most likely commercial avenue for geologic hydrogen will be infrastructure that's built close to point of production. So if you find a reservoir of hydrogen in a rural community, you'll probably follow that up with an ammonia production facility or a sustainable aviation fuel production facility. And so drilling wells is a temporary effort where you're drilling wells and you're going to hire local labor to do that. Those long-term operating plants create high-paying jobs that last forever, right? And everybody finances these plants based on 20 or 30-year lifetimes, but we all know they operate for 60 years and 70 years as the backbone of local economies. And so geologic hydrogen can really establish that kind of backbone in rural areas. And specifically about farming, right? We import 2.4 million tons of ammonia per year in the United States. You know, Missouri was impacted by the spike in ammonia prices, which had nothing to do with the cost of ammonia in the U.S. It was the cost people were paying for ammonia in Europe getting from Russia, right? The U.S. is the largest net importer of ammonia today. Food security and energy security are both national security. So this can impact our ammonia and our farming and our food system in considerable ways.
And what would be, when you talk about blue-collar jobs, help me understand what the potential is there. What kind of jobs are we thinking might be associated with this technology? I mean, what kind of jobs might it create for blue-collar workers in particular?
Plant operators, facility operators, you know, outside operators, technicians, mechanics, all the people who work. You know, if you look at the workforce that operates chemical plants, refineries, ammonia facilities, liquefiers, there's majority of those jobs are blue-collar, you know, skilled craft jobs.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. We're going to go around real quick if you have another question, Senator Hawley, if you have another one. Well, I have one. I think Senator Heinrich has one, if you have one, okay. Mine, very quickly, Dr. Ellis, is for you. You mentioned geologic hydrogen could be located in the offshore. Was that correct? Offshore. Does that mean that we're going to need to look at... We're going to turn to the ranking member.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to everybody for being here. Mr. Coleman, you raised in your opening statement what is, I think, my nightmare scenario, which is you made the comment that pretty soon it's going to be anybody with an internet connection is going to be able to access and use deepfake technology. I wonder if we're there already, though. I mean, I'm looking at this article from the New York Times just a few days ago. The headline is, "Teen Girls Confront an Epidemic of Deepfake Nudes in Schools." The details of this are just unbelievable. I mean, this is a young girl, Francesca Mani, at a high school in Westfield, New Jersey, and she's a 10th grader. All of this is in the article. She's a 10th grader, and she found out that a number of boys in her class had used artificial intelligence software to fabricate sexually explicit images of her and a number of her friends, and then were circulating them online and, you know, showing them to classmates, but putting them onto platforms. Now, I presume that these teenage boys didn't pay a lot of money in order to do this. In fact, the article goes on to say that they used widely available nudification apps to create these fake photos. So they take the photos of their classmates from, you know, Instagram or wherever, and use those, feed them into this app, and then here you are, and it probably costs them almost nothing. So I guess my question to you is, are we at the point now with this technology where we're going to see a flood of AI-generated CSAM, a flood of other sexually explicit material created of adults or young adults? I mean, is this the point that we're at now?
Ranking Member Hawley, we were at that point 6 months ago. And the challenge for us right now is where the U.S. is leading the development of a lot of these novel technological tools. We're not leading in regulations to protect from these tools. We have Taiwan, we have Singapore, we even have China with more advanced regulations in this space. And to your point, beyond elections, thinking about different types of kind of equally or more dangerous risks from deepfakes, there was recently a House Oversight and Accountability Committee referencing very scary statistics that 98% of all deepfakes are actually pornographic. 99%.
Sorry, what was the percentage?
98% of all deepfakes. 99% of people targeting deepfakes are women. The 40 most popular deepfake pornography websites have over 143,000 deepfakes pornography, unpermissioned, just in the last year. getting over 4 billion views. Now, these two numbers are more than the previous 10 years combined. So when I say this is already a problem, it's been a problem. We're waking up to it now, and the selection is just one risk that the larger world of regulations can solve for.
So I guess my question is, I mean, given that, what is the most effective regulatory avenues to pursue? I mean, how are we going to empower people like Francesca and her parents and the hundreds of thousands, I mean, is it soon going to be millions of women who have had their images used, commandeered, we'd say in a legal sense, and turned into this sexually explicit material? How are we going to empower them?
It's quite simple. You mentioned CSAM imagery. There's a really nice framework in both national and also state-level regulations in the space. When you upload something on, for example, YouTube, it's checking for a few things. It's checking for violence. It's checking for underage imagery. It's checking for, are you uploading the latest Drake song? That's because of regulations. So to scan for generative media would just be another check within that same flow. It's nothing new, nothing novel. It just needs your teams to actually push it forward to require the platforms to protect the consumers. Because in the absence of this, we have things like community notes, which only actually cause anything once things have been shared 100 million times. Or worse than that, we have content moderation teams, which we've seen be slashed, and they don't really do anything at all. So the challenge here right now is that the technology exists. We have folks on this DS who can actually solve for it. We need regulations to require the platforms themselves to use us the same way they're required to scan for underage imagery.
Sorry, really quick, a point on that. I think it's important to understand that for like a deep nude image, they're shared on like WhatsApp and things like that. Those are end-to-end encrypted. You can't detect that. It doesn't make any sense. To solve that specific deep nude, you need AI poisoning, which is part of the defense in depth. Anytime you upload an image to Instagram, you can poison it so that if someone tries to deep nude it, it turns out as garbage. So specifically for deep nudes of like images posted to Instagram, AI poisoning is that solution.
Yeah, and, I hear what you're saying, and all of that sounds good, and I hear what you're saying about the platform's current obligations and their current rules that they have in place, for instance, to detect CSAM and so forth. But the problem is that this committee and other committees have heard mountainous evidence that these same platforms are absolutely awash in CSAM that is not digitally created, it's not synthetic, it is, quote unquote, real, it's actual people, which is even worse. And they're just they say that they're trying to do their best, but it is absolutely the internet, particularly Facebook, Instagram, absolutely overrun. Which brings me to what I think has got to be part of this conversation, is we have got to allow Americans, ordinary Americans, individual citizens, we have got to allow them to get into court and to hold accountable legally companies who are producing or hosting this content. If we don't do that, I don't see how we change the incentive structure. If Instagram fears that it's going to get $1 billion jury verdict against it, they'll adopt all kinds of new technology. But if they don't, they won't. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Hawley. Senator Klobuchar.
So true, Senator Hawley.
Thank you. Thanks, Senator Hassan. Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for convening this hearing. Thanks to each of the witnesses for being here. Mr. Salapur, let me just start with you. I just want to back up and make sure I understand your testimony because it seems extraordinary to me. And I'm reading the letters that you've submitted from your attorney when you first contacted the FAA, when you contacted the committee. So my understanding is you worked on both the 787 and the 7777, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you identified major safety concerns with both of these lines,
yes, sir.
And you identified these to your superiors.
Yes, sir. I have written many memos, time after time, that we can provide.
Over a period of years, I think.
Yeah, this is like 3 years. For the 787, it's been 3 years of effort.
And so your concerns, who knew about your concerns? How far up the chain do you know that they went?
I have gone as high as Mark Stockton and Lisa Fall, who's the vice president.
The vice president of the company? Yes. So they were and are aware of these major safety concerns. And this is what you do for a living. I mean, you're an engineer, right?
I'm an engineer. I went to quality about 3-4 years ago. And when you put your quality hat, we are the eyes and ears of the public for the safety of the airplane. That's how I feel about our job. And so I have, when I see concerning information or concerning, let's say, production issues, then it is our responsibility to make sure that, if we are causing the airplane to have increased risk factors, our job is to eliminate those risk factors.
Are these planes safe?
Right now, I would not, it's like an earthquake. The big earthquake is coming, but when that hits the building that, let's say if you're talking of a building, have to be prepared to accommodate that type of a, let's say, shakeup. It has to be built properly. Right now, from what I've seen, the airplanes are not being built per spec and per requirement.
So your testimony is the 787 line and the 777, the 777 line are you think are not.
Well,
not safe.
they are doing stuff that increases the risk factors. Okay, when you increase the risk factors, it's not just one. You are doing stress concentrations. That those stress concentrations, like breaking a paper clip. You do it once or twice, it doesn't break, but it breaks at some time. As the plane gets older, all of these things that you took. You said it's not a safety issue, it becomes a safety issue.
And the company's response to you was to threaten you?
Threaten you, sideline you, transfer you.
You raised concerns about the 787, and so they transferred you to the 777, right?
Well, yes. Initially, they just cut me off of all the meetings.
Ah.
They took my name out. And then, so I was just doing nothing. I wasn't informed of what. Then they transferred me. And they do it pretty stealthy. Oh, we have a job over here. We want you to go over there. So they move you down there. And, I come from like 40 years of engineering background. So when I see, and I've taken a lot of stress classes, even though I'm not a specialist on that, but when there's a problematic area that you see, you can recognize.
So I just want to make sure I got the sequence right. So you raise these concerns, you get on the 787, you get transferred over to the 777, you raise the concerns there. They ignore it in both, they haven't addressed any of these concerns. Is that your testimony?
Yes, sir.
And at some point, they start to threaten you. You're talking about your boss calling you on your personal phone and berating you. And when did that start?
Well, that started right after when I said, we have made over 300 plus airplanes. We still don't know how to put the load and cell. What I mean by that, if you build in an airplane, build in a house, it's like, put in the foundation. We have made over 300 airplanes. We still changing our process, like build the foundation to put the airplanes. We are struggling with that because they have changed the process from stable to unstable situation. They're not building the same datums that we were building. So you're causing your own problem, but you don't want to admit it. Just force fit the problem, force fit the misaligned holes and everything else and move on. And that's what they have been doing. And that's what I have brought up to their attention. I told my boss that I said in the report, I said, we have made 300 plus airplanes. That should have been more than adequate for us to resolve these things. All the problems that we've had, we put Band-Aid over Band-Aid to resolve the problems, and Band-Aid over Band-Aid doesn't cover it. Maybe we need to consider some engineering fundamentals with a little bit of GD&T to figure out what the problem is. And right after that, he came back to my desk, and he like I said, he made the threat, and then after that, he says, are you in or are you out?
Meaning what? Are you in and are you out with Boeing? Are you going to be a good citizen and keep your mouth shut? Was that the implication?
That's how I can interpret that. He would walk by me and he said, you better, then he said, I want you to write it in writing. Tell me, are you in or are you out?
Put it in writing whether or not you were going to.
I'm in or out. And what that means, are you going to just shut up?
Right.
That's all.
That would be in. If you wanted to be in, you needed to be quiet. You needed to stop this. Don't say anything more. Certainly, don't tell the public.
That's how I interpreted it. But he told me to write it in writing, and I'm trying to write it. And there was 10 emails, just because I haven't received your email on this. Send it to me, and this and that.
So then he's pressuring you.
Then he's pressuring you, and then his manipulation even got further than that. I'm trying to take a class on my own time that I have to flex the time. He wouldn't let me do that. Oh. I have a doctor's appointment. He cancels my doctor appointment at the same day. Different manipulating different things to retaliate, to make your life miserable. And then, I started talking to go somewhere else, I mean, you just try to escape from that because this is hell, that I was subjected to. And then he threatens you with that. And really, with my background, I've had some, it's really has made me where 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm waking up with somebody stabbing me. I'm still receiving psychological help to just get back on normal.
Well, it is unbelievable to me that in the midst of this safety crisis at this corporation, that what they're doing is threatening their own engineers whose job it is to help identify potential safety concerns. And rather than saying, you know what, you've got a point, we need to maybe do something about this, they're telling you to hide it, they're reassigning you, they're threatening you, they're trying to shut you up. In the meantime, I noticed this guy, Dave Calhoun, I think he's the CEO. I guess he's leaving at the end of the year. I wonder how much he's getting paid. I bet it's a lot.
Yes, it's a lot more than my pay grade.
I bet it's a lot more than your paycheck.
Yeah.
I bet it's a heck of a lot.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this hearing. I think we're just scratching the surface here, but this is extraordinary. It's just extraordinary. Thank you.
I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Giving us the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all of the witnesses for being here. Ms. Pacheco, if I could just start with you. Your organization, the Dream.us, you provide support for undocumented young people for college and career success. Is that broadly right? Am I getting it right?
That's correct.
And among the things you do is you provide scholarships to these undocumented students. Have I got that correct?
That's right.
And so college scholarships, just to be clear.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. Can you tell me, maybe you know the answer to this, maybe you don't, any of the students, do you know if any of the students to whom your organization has provided a college scholarship are currently part of the encampments on any of these college campuses? Like the picture you see behind me, I'm sure we've all seen these videos.
No, Senator.
Nobody to whom you provide scholarships are part of the encampments?
I do not know.
You don't know. What about, do you know if any of the students to whom you provided scholarships have physically threatened Jewish students on campus?
I do not know.
Here's why I'm asking. NBC News just reported, and I'm just going to quote now from the article, quote, this is Columbia University, a Columbia undergraduate who provided only her initials because she is an undocumented immigrant and fears deportation, said last week she spent hours a day in the encampment. This would be the illegal encampment that's in violation of the law as well as campus policy. Spent hours a day in the encampment, I'm quoting still now, before university officials threatened to suspend those students. The article goes on, she joined, this student, joined a supplies platoon. That's a subgroup formed by pro-Palestinian campus organizers, end quote. Let me just review some of the things that these students, these in the encampments, that is, are saying. Of course, we often don't know who these students are. They're concealing their identities. This is, I'm going to read to you now, and I just warn folks, this is not pleasant stuff, but these are the facts, and we have to tell the truth. This is just from last night at George Washington University. That's here in this town. They projected, the students in the encampment there projected onto various buildings images of the United States flag being burned with the graphics, Gaza lights the spark that will set the empire ablaze. They projected the following: long live the student intifada. Down with the settler state. That would be the state of Israel, I suppose. Glory to the martyrs of Palestine. It's a jihadist slogan. Stained with the blood of 44,000 Palestinians. That's last night at GW. Also at GW, they're now calling for beheading, the student encampment, beheading of individuals who support the state of Israel, including holding a people's tribunal where they're putting on trial, quote unquote, various members of their own board of trustees and calling for a guillotine. Here's Columbia University students on April the 20th, 2024. This is all public record. I'm reading this now. This is on, I guess it's X. Columbia University students yelling at Jewish students, and I quote, "Never forget October 7th. It will not happen, it will happen, not one more time, not 5 more times, not 10, not 100, not 1,000, but 10,000 times. The 7th of October is going to be every day for you. The 7th of October, this is to Jewish students, is going to be every day for you, end quote. I guess my question is, Ms. Pacheco, and for anybody else on the panel too, shouldn't we be deporting these students? If we have undocumented students who are here unlawfully in the country who are violating the law, let's just be clear here now, this is a violation of the law, and if they're also deliberately inciting persecution of a person on account of their race, which surely calling for the murder of Jews does that, shouldn't we be deporting them? Does anybody think we shouldn't be? Shouldn't we be deporting these students who are here unlawfully? Ms. Pacheco?
Senator, we expect a lot from our scholars, and the scholars and the students that I know love this country, respect this country, and want to and enrich not only the campuses, but also this country.
That's fantastic, and I hope and bet that none of the people that you sponsor are part of this. And I certainly hope that's the case. But I just wondered, is there anybody on the panel who thinks that we should not deport students who are here unlawfully, who are engaging in this activity, who are calling for the death of Jewish students, who are violating the laws of the United States? I mean, shouldn't we be deporting these people? Does anybody want to defend it and say, no, we shouldn't? They should absolutely be here. I think it's indefensible. The record reflects there's total silence from the panel. You know, I also think we ought to cancel the student visas, and I've called for this. For those who are here from other countries with a visa, I think if they're part of this, we ought to be canceling their visas. We ought to send a clear message. Actually, Ms. Pacheco, I think it was you in your opening statement put it really beautifully about how part of what we're talking here today represents the character of the country. I think that's very appropriate. And we need to send a message about this activity, not just about the trespassing and the destruction of buildings. That's bad, that's unlawful. But the threats of violence, and in some cases the outright acts of violence against Jewish students, we should send a moral message that if you do that and you are here unlawfully, you should be deported. If you are here on a student visa, you ought to have your visa canceled. This is the United States of America, and we are not going to stand for it. And I would just hope we could speak with one moral voice on this issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman.
Agree with, or am I making a mistake?
I completely agree with you, Senator Romney. That's well stated.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Romney. Senator Hawley, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for holding this hearing. Thanks for the witnesses for being here. You know, I have to say, I think one of the worst things that happened in the COVID era is that our own government deliberately withheld information from us, from the American people, tried to propagandize the American people, used the arms and agencies of government to actively censor Americans who dared to question the propaganda, and they're still lying to us. And I'll give you the proof of it. I wrote the bill that requires the administration to declassify the intelligence assessments and reports related to the origins of COVID-19. Now listen, I just want to say, everybody sitting on this dais has read these. I've read them. I guarantee you my colleagues have read them. I know what the Energy Department concluded. I know what the FBI concluded. I knew what they concluded years ago because we could read them when people like Dr. Fauci were out there saying the lab leak hypothesis was totally discredited and nonsense. You could go read the intelligence and know our own government thought otherwise. And at this late hour, this government still refuses to release the intelligence. They are blatantly disregarding the law that this body passed, the Senate passed, unanimously. The propaganda involved in the origins of COVID-19 is astounding to me. It recalls the worst of the wartime propaganda in years past when the government would deliberately lie to people. And here that's what they have been doing with COVID-19 and are still doing it. You know, you had this whole cabal led by Dr. Fauci and others who, as soon as the lab leak hypothesis that we now know is a lot more than a hypothesis, as soon as it's mentioned, what did Fauci do? We know because this has all been litigated in a federal district court. In fact, in multiple federal courts. I've got the finding of fact from the court right here. They lay it all out. Fauci goes to the WHO, asks the WHO to intervene to discredit the lab leak. He then speaks against it multiple times from the podium at the White House. He then does countless media interviews. I mean, my gosh, what show has he not been on? He's still on TV, spewing this misinformation, as he would call it. But he did these multiple interviews where he says, no way, no how, lab leak not possible at all. And then he coordinates, and the whole federal government coordinates with the biggest tech companies in the world to suppress, and media companies, to suppress any American who would ask questions about it. It's absolutely disgraceful. Dr. Geary, you were part of this propaganda effort. I mean, you were right at the center of it. It's astounding. You wrote this piece, this Nature magazine piece, or whatever it was, that we've heard testimony here today, Nature Medicine, March 17th, 2020. We've heard testimony here today from other scientists on the panel that it's basically an opinion piece. You said at the time that definitively SARS-CoV-2 is not a laboratory construct, is not a laboratory construct. Of course, our own government, key agencies have concluded otherwise. And on the basis of this, Dr. Fauci and others cited this piece and went out to use it to mobilize our own government to censor people who ask questions about it. People lost their jobs because of this. They lost their jobs, they lost their standing, they were kicked off Facebook, they were kicked off Twitter. Do you regret being part of this effort, this propaganda effort?
Sir, I was simply just writing a paper about our scientific opinions about where this virus came from.
Oh, no, you weren't. You said in an email that we now have that you tried to withhold, but that we have February 2nd, 2020, you wrote, I really can't think of a plausible natural scenario where you can get from the bat virus or one very similar to it to this. I'm quoting you. I just can't figure out how this gets accomplished in nature. It's stunning. Of course, in the lab, it would be easy.
Well, of course. And I actually figured it out. That's the whole point of it.
You figured it out? You wrote this while you were writing your propaganda piece, while you were writing your paper.
I wrote that somewhere around February 2nd.
It was exactly February 2nd. And you've testified that you were writing your proximal origin paper in early February. So you're saying that, what did it come to you overnight?
There was new data that
like
came in.
A revelation from God.
No. It's
overnight you concluded,
method.
I got it. I figured it out. I've figured it out. And now I can definitively rule out. It's amazing. Is that what happened?
It's just the scientific method.
Oh, it's just science. Oh, it's the scientific method that happened at lightning speed and then was used to propagandize and lie to and shut down. As a scientist who's supposedly supposed to follow facts, do you regret the fact that your work was used to censor your fellow scientists? It was used to censor ordinary Americans who ask questions about the virus? Do you regret that?
When you write a paper, I mean, you get it in the journal. We can't control what happens after.
Oh, I see. So you're not responsible at all. It's amazing. Nobody who is involved in any of this is responsible. Never. Yeah. They're not responsible. Yeah, people have lost their jobs.
Yeah.
People have lost probably their health care associated with their jobs. People have been run out of public, they're not available in polite society. You can't show your face because, my gosh, you question. Yeah. But you don't have anything to do with it. Why have so many of your papers, your other papers, been retracted or subjected to formal expressions of concern?
Yeah, well,
why is that?
There's a long story behind that.
Four of them, right? I mean, you've had in July 26, 2021, Virology retracted a paper of yours. Also in 2021, the Journal of General Virology retracted another of your papers. In March of 2022, an expression of concern was added by an editor of yet another journal to another of your papers. In April 4th of 2024, a third scientific paper of yours was retracted from the Journal of Medical Virology. Yeah. Is this normal?
Those papers didn't come from my lab, but I'm certainly helping.
They're not yours?
They're not mine, no.
Oh, so your
I'm
your
on
work
the paper, but they did not come
from my lab.
The
work that God gave you in a flash of inspiration remains absolutely unimpeachable, unimpeached.
We stand by that.
Do you stand by your assertion in your Nature piece that SARS-CoV-2 is not a laboratory construct? Could not be?
We do, and that's exactly the same
couldn't possibly be
conclusion that the intelligence community came to.
Oh, no, sure, that is a lie. Let's stop right there.
Well,
that is a lie. I have read the intelligence community did not come to that conclusion. Multiple intelligence community agents and components have concluded it was likely a lab leak. And they concluded that at the same time that you and your people were propagandizing the American public and using the channels and influence of the American government to censor ordinary Americans. That is the truth. I'm not going to sit here and allow you to lie any further. Dr. Gary, you have disgracefully participated in shameful propaganda that has been one of the worst chapters in this country's history, with the government propagandizing its own people. And you know what? You may be right about I'm not a scientist, I don't know, but what I do know is, it is wrong. It is wrong to censor and lie to the American public. It is wrong to withhold critical information from them. And it is wrong to countenance that and to say, oh, I just had nothing to do with it. Gee, I wish we could have done better. You should have done better, sir. You should have done better. And because you didn't, people have suffered. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Could I
Dr. Gary, if you'd like to respond, I think you can respond to your question.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Calhoun, what is it that you get paid currently?
Senator, that's well disclosed in our proxy documents in each of the years that I've been employed.
Yeah, but what is it?
It's a big number, sir.
Well, let me help you out. It's $32.8 million this year. Does that sound right?
Yes, it does.
That's a 45% increase over last year. Does that sound right?
Yes, it does.
What is it you get paid to do exactly?
I get paid to run the Boeing company.
Yeah. So just help me understand that. I mean, do you get paid for transparency? Is that one of the metrics for your income?
I think the board counts on me for transparency.
Really? Because you're under investigation for falsifying 787 inspection records. The Boeing's under criminal investigation for the Alaska Airlines flight. You were investigated by DOJ for criminal conspiracy to defraud the FAA. This is all in your tenure. This doesn't sound like a lot of transparency to me. What about safety? Is that a component of your salary?
It sure is, Senator.
You know, have you seen the reports that the subcontractor that you used to make that door piece that fell out of the sky, that when the FAA went and toured the facility, they found one door seal being lubricated with Dawn liquid dish soap and cleaned with a wet cheesecloth, and another was being checked with a hotel room key card? Does that sound like safety to you?
Senator, I think our relationship with that particular supplier has been well documented, reviewed by the FAA, and most certainly us. And I'm very intent on acquiring that company so that none of that ever happens.
You know, the FAA also says that Boeing still has not implemented the recommended steps back from 2019 and 2020 after the MAX crashes. You still have not taken the appropriate safety procedures or implemented what they recommended. I mean, how, if safety is a component of your $33 million compensation package, I mean, how can you possibly qualify for any of this? What about quality? Is quality part of your compensation package?
Senator, I meet with the FAA pretty regularly. They don't hold anything back, and I'm not aware of anything that has been cited with respect to those accidents that we haven't taken action on.
Really? Because we've had whistleblowers. You said you'd listen to whistleblower testimony. We've had multiple whistleblowers come before this committee and allege that Boeing is cutting every possible corner on quality and safety, not just in the past, but now. They've alleged that you've eliminated safety inspections, that there are fewer in quality and there are fewer inspectors doing quality inspections out there. They've alleged that when they raised quality issues and concerns, they were reassigned, they were retaliated against, they were physically threatened. That doesn't sound like attention to quality to me. And yet you're getting paid $33 million a year. It's extraordinary.
Senator, we have increased our quality inspectors significantly.
How much has your stock price increased while you've been at Boeing?
It hasn't, and I don't watch it much.
Have you done any stock buybacks while you've been at Boeing?
Not in my job, no.
How about your profits? Have your profits increased at all while you've
I haven't had any profits, sir.
I'm sorry?
I have not had any profits.
Yeah. You know, I think the truth is, Mr. Calhoun, you're not focused on safety. You're not focused on quality. You're not focused on transparency. All of this is in the record. But I think actually you're focused on exactly what you were hired to do, which is that you're cutting corners. You are eliminating safety procedures. You are sticking it to your employees. You are cutting back jobs because you're trying to squeeze every piece of profit you can out of this country, this company. You're strip mining it. You're strip mining Boeing. It was one of the greatest American companies ever. It has employed thousands of people in my state. And you are strip mining it for profit, shareholder value, and you're being rewarded for it. You got a huge raise, a huge increase. So it's working out great for you. For the American people, they're in danger. For your workers, they're in peril. For your whistleblowers, they literally fear for their lives, but you're getting compensated like never before. Don't you think maybe your priorities are misplaced here? I mean, don't you think maybe it's time to get back to focusing on making quality planes and paying your workers well and taking care of the little guys who got you to where you are? That's not a rhetorical question.
Senator, I don't recognize any of the Boeing you described.
Really?
And I want to assure...
You don't recognize the Boeing that has airplanes falling out of the sky, that has had 2 Maxes crash, that has had pieces of doors fall out of the sky, that have had whistleblowers come before they've sat right where you have sat and told us, these are your employees who have told us that when these are the engineers, by the way. Are you an engineer?
I'm not, sir.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
And they have said that they're not listened to, that they're retaliated against, that they're threatened. That's the reality of Boeing today. That's your company that you have created. Now, I don't recognize it either from the company it used to be decades ago, but under your leadership, that's what Boeing is, and you're being rewarded for it handsomely, handsomely. Don't you think there's something wrong with that? Why haven't you resigned?
Yeah, Senator, I stand by what I said, and I want to assure the great employees in your state that that is not the way we operate the company, and it never will be. And if you would like my chief engineer to talk about what he sees and
No,
hears.
I want to hear from you, because what I hear from you is a lot of this team does that and that team does that, and I listen to the whistleblowers, but I don't meet with them. And I've heard about all this stuff that you Congress have meddlesomely asked for because the public wants to see it, gosh darn them, but you actually haven't supervised any of it. I've heard that. It's a lot of it's this, it's that, it's this, it's that. But meanwhile, you're getting paid a heck of a lot of money. It's unbelievable. If anybody's coming out of this deal good, it's you. Why haven't you resigned?
Senator, I'm sticking this through. I'm proud of having taken the job. I'm proud of our safety record, and I am very proud of our Boeing people.
You're proud of this safety record?
I am proud of every action we have taken.
Every action you've taken?
Yes, sir.
Wow. Wow. There's some news for you. Well, behind you, you can't see it. Behind you, the folks are showing pictures of the people who are the victims of your safety record. I think we can all see them. And I think the American public, when they fear to get on their airplanes, they understand your safety record. And frankly, sir, I think it's a travesty that you're still in your job.
Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Calhoun, just to come back to you, isn't a big part of this story not just what's happened at Boeing in the last year or two, but what's happened over the last 20, what the C-suite has done to this company? Let me give you an example. This is from the Atlantic magazine last month. For nearly 40 years, the company, Boeing, built the 737 fuselage itself in the same plant that turned out its B-29 and B-52 bombers. In 2005, it sold this facility to a private investment firm. Offloading, Boeing called it. The tail, the landing gear, the flight controls, and other essentials were outsourced to factories around the world, owned by others, and then just shipped to Boeing for final assembly. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, with consent, have this article, Boeing in the Dark Age of American Manufacturing.
Without objection.
You now have at least 600 direct suppliers worldwide. Who knows how many subcontractors? You've got 35 direct suppliers in China alone. I mean, hasn't this really been the hollowing out of Boeing?
Senator Hawley, I think the decision that we have made with respect to Spirit Aero and our determination to bring it back into the Boeing fold is definitely a vote in favor of vertical integration.
That's one.
I can't comment on all of the ones of the past. And we have not had the number of issues in those that we are currently dealing with respect to our fuselage. So I can't rewrite history, but I can take action
You're in charge
forward.
you're in charge of the company. I'm just asking you. You're in charge of a company. You're getting paid $33 million a year. You're in charge of a company that has systematically, over decades now, shipped out its jobs, shipped out its production. Over the last decade, while you've either been in charge as CEO or on the board, stock prices have rose 600% at Boeing. You've, in fact, done $59 billion in returning cash to shareholders, $20 billion of that in dividends, $39 billion of that in stock buyback. Some people are doing great here. I'm just wondering, given the fact that your airplanes are falling out of the sky, do you think that any of that has to do with the fact that you really don't make that much anymore in this country or in-house? I mean, hasn't it been a mistake to hollow out the company and ship your production and your manufacturing and your know-how to other places around the world instead of doing it yourself, the American engineers, American workers?
Senator Hawley, I think I read an annual report going all the way back to the introduction of the 747, which highlighted the fact that 65% of that airplane would be sourced by U.S. manufacturers here and there. And the other thing I do know that since 2015, again, I don't have all that history but before that, we have actually brought more work to the U.S. than we have taken out of the U.S. And at an absolute level, our work in the U.S. is in the high 80%. And that is unlike any other industry I have ever worked in.
These are your suppliers, you're saying? These
Yes.
are your subcontractors,
Yes.
right? The ones who are using Dawn dish soap to test their doors and cheesecloth to test the plugs, right? Those. Your CFO, Brian West, recently went on the record and said that Boeing probably got a little too far ahead of itself on the topic of outsourcing. You agree with that?
He was speaking directly to our decision to go after Spirit.
So he was right?
He was speaking directly to our decision to vertically integrate Spirit.
So he was right. You got too far ahead of yourself on outsourcing for all of these years. Is Boeing going to change course on this?
We are most certainly changing course on Spirit.
You've got 32,000 machinists. These are American workers who work for you. These are Boeing employees in the Pacific Northwest. You're in contract negotiations with them right now. 32,000, that's a lot of them. The last time that they got a contract was 16 years ago. Do you remember the terms of that contract?
I don't. It was a very long contract.
Yeah, well, they got 1% wage increases over 8 years. 1% over 8 years. You got a 45% increase just last year, and you're making $33 million. You think maybe these folks deserve a raise?
Oh, they will definitely get a raise.
Good, good. I hope it's a substantial one. And I hope that maybe this will be an opportunity for Boeing, under new leadership, to reverse course and actually start making things again, start making things in this country again, and start paying its people well. I've listened to your testimony, and it seems like the gist of it seems to be that if you could just get your employees to comply, follow the rules, follow your management techniques, et cetera, things would be better. I don't think the problem's with the employees.
Oh, it's
actually.
not. It is
Yeah,
not.
I think the
agree.
problem's with you. You. It's the C-suite. It's the management. It's what you've done to this company. That's where the problem is. The problem's at the top. Your engineers, they're probably the best in the world. Your machinists, they're outstanding. You're the problem. And I just hope to God that you don't destroy this company before it can be saved. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all the witnesses for being here. Dr. Wollenitz, if I could start with you. You served as the chief of staff to Francis Collins for 4 years, is that right?
That's correct, Senator.
From 2017 to 2021, is that
Yes,
correct?
that's
so
correct.
right through the heart of the pandemic.
Yes.
I noticed that Dr. Collins was intensely interested in discrediting the lab leak. I guess we'll call it a hypothesis. I think it's probably a little bit stronger than that now that we know something of what our intelligence agencies have long assessed. Last month, I had the chance to speak with Dr. Robert Gary, who sat right where you are, who co-authored that really frankly shameless propaganda piece, the Proximal Origin paper, which infamously stated that the SARS-CoV-2 is not a laboratory construct or a purposely manipulated virus. It went on to say it could not possibly have come from a lab. This, of course, we now know is not what multiple U.S. intelligence agencies assessed. What interests me is that your office was very involved in that paper, which was supposed to be an independent piece of scientific analysis, but Dr. Collins actually called Dr. Gary when he was supposedly working on the paper on February 1st, 2020. Is it normal for scientists who are supposedly doing independent research to get together and talk about how their conclusions are going to come out?
Thank you for the question, Senator Hawley. I think in general, yes, it is quite common for scientists across biomedical research fields, while they're in the process of doing research, to discuss with colleagues and other scientists. I do not believe that that is an accurate description of the conversations that took place.
Well, tell us, what were the nature of the conversations?
So while I was not present for those conversations, my understanding based on readouts is there was a lot of interest in the origins and current understanding of SARS-CoV-2. And I think it's important when we're talking about the term lab leak theory to differentiate between the idea of a virus escaping from a lab, which is a biosafety violation, versus a virus that is engineered or manipulated in the lab and then escapes.
Yeah, and your boss and Dr. Fauci tried to discredit both of those things. They said that the lab was absolutely not involved. We know that at the time that this paper was supposedly being written, because we now have the private correspondence from Dr. Fauci, your boss said that it was a very destructive conspiracy to think that there was a lab involved. So he's on the phone with a scientist, quote-unquote scientist, who's supposedly writing an independent paper. By the way, Dr. Gary testified under oath that he was coming to his conclusions while this paper was being written. He was discovering the answers. But we now know that your boss was on the phone with him saying this is a very destructive conspiracy before the paper was even written. My question is, why was your office so intent on pushing to the public the idea that this could not possibly have been a lab issue? Is it because of the NIH's role in funding gain-of-function research at the lab? Is that the reason why?
So, Senator Hawley, I would say that in the event of any new and emerging infectious disease, if you've ever gone through a tabletop exercise in biosecurity,
Yeah. Answer my question. Is it because that NIH was actually helping to fund, EcoHealth was funding gain-of-function research?
No, I believe that's an inaccurate assessment.
In fact, your boss misled Congress and testified falsely that NIH and the EcoHealth had never conducted gain-of-function research at Wuhan, correct?
No, that's incorrect.
He did testify that.
I believe, sir, that what he testified to was that there was no evidence at that time that NIH was funding research that met the scope of the P3CO policy, which I want to differentiate from the term gain-of-function research.
Oh, of course, this is the classic. This is the classic. Now that we've lied, now that you have, and your office lied to the American people for years, told the American people that a lab leak was a very destructive conspiracy. That's your boss's statement while you were his chief of staff. Of course, we now know that that was the conspiracy to hide this from the American people, to censor people who went out and said, you know what, actually, maybe this is a lab leak. Your office, Dr. Fauci and others, tried to actively censor them. There was a propaganda effort that this paper was the center of, and now everybody says, oh well, we just weren't sure at the time. We didn't really know. You knew exactly what you were doing. You were actively misleading the American people the entire time. Get this, after that paper, it's really an opinion piece, was published, your boss then says to Dr. Fauci that he had really hoped that the paper would settle this. Is there anything more that we can do to shut down this destructive conspiracy? This is in April of 2020. And then Dr. Fauci went to the White House podium and said that absolutely there's no way that this could have come from a lab. Let me come back to my original question. Why was your office so intent
on shutting down any talk about this being involved with a lab. Why? I don't understand it. Why the hysteria?
So, Senator Hawley, I will say that my understanding of the situation is that no one at NIH, including Dr. Collins, Dr. Fauci, myself, ever suggested that there wasn't the possibility that a virus had escaped from a lab.
Oh, that's ridiculous. Let me just stop you right there. I cannot have these lies just continue to be told over and over again. Sorry, and wrong. That's false. You people repeatedly said it could not have come from a lab. Your boss said it was a very destructive conspiracy. Not that it was unlikely, not that it was not the best idea, a conspiracy. And based on that, you censored, and your administration that you worked for actively censored scientists, journalists, and what we now know is our own intelligence agencies at the same time were concluding and briefing members of Congress that it likely was from a lab leak. I mean, it's extraordinary. And now you've been caught red-handed because you thought that the rest of us wouldn't find out. You thought that the public would always be kept in the dark. And as it turns out, we now know these emails have become public, that you were pushing this propaganda effort and yet claiming the mantle of science. Don't you see that what you have done has set back the respectability and integrity of science by generations? You were acting as propagandists. Do you regret your role in any of this?
So, Senator Hawley, I don't think you've characterized
Do you
my
regret your role in
of
any of the
NIH.
misleading of the public? Do you regret your role in your office saying that a lab nexus here is a very destructive conspiracy? Do you regret your role in helping censor millions of Americans who were kicked off social media, who were disciplined at work for saying that maybe a lab was involved, which we now know the FBI thinks is the case? Do you regret it?
I do not believe I ever had the role that you're describing.
Do you regret anything that you did during this period? Do you regret not speaking out? Do you regret not advising your boss to temper his comments? Do you regret not opposing the censorship? Do you regret it? You're in a position of tremendous influence.
I do not believe censorship took place, sir.
You don't believe censorship took place?
I do not.
What world are you living in? Tell that to the scientists who basically lost their credentials. Tell that to the people who were kicked off of social media and banned because they asked about a lab leak. You don't believe censorship took place? The privilege is astounding. You were the chief of staff at the NIH pushing these conspiracies, pushing the effort to shut down Americans, and now you have the gall to sit here and say censorship never took place. I mean, it's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Senator,
I can't believe, I cannot believe that that's your testimony. And frankly, I can't believe you have the gall to sit here and say that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Rosen, you're recognized for your questions.
Senator Peters, may I have a chance to expand on my comments for a moment?
If you could be brief, please. We have other questions.
Yes, thank you. I think I want to make it very clear that I certainly, and I do believe this is true of others at NIH as well, including Dr. Collins and Dr. Fauci, have never dismissed that the potential origins of SARS-CoV-2 leading to the COVID-19 pandemic are known, that there is that we just don't have the evidence to be able to make a determination.
That's not what the paper said. The paper said it couldn't have come from a lab. It could not have come from a lab. Your boss said it was a very destructive conspiracy. But
please let her finish.
I'd like to go forward with my questions, please.
Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for holding this hearing. Mr. Rittner, let me start with you. You're with Intel, right?
Yes, that's correct.
We've been asking questions about Russia. Let me just ask you a question or two about China, if I could. Why is it that your company is investing so much in China, particularly in Chinese artificial intelligence and semiconductor startups?
Yeah, China is the second largest economy in the world.
Any proceeds that we actually make in China, we reinvest back into the U.S. so that we can contribute to U.S. leadership.
Well, wait a minute. So you're telling me it's good for the United States that you are investing billions of dollars in Chinese artificial intelligence? Let me just read you from a Financial Times article. Intel's venture capital arm has emerged as one of the most active foreign investors in Chinese artificial intelligence and semiconductor startups at a time that the chip maker is receiving billions of dollars from Washington to fund a technological arms race with Beijing. Is the money that you're getting from the United States government enabling your investment in China?
At this point, we have not received money from the United States, but the money that we're to receive is invested entirely in the United States to grow semiconductor manufacturing.
You have 43 China-based technology startups. Since your venture fund was launched in the early 1990s, has invested in more than 120 Chinese groups, including their data provider Crunchbase. I'm still quoting from the FT article. You've continued to back fledgling Chinese companies, even in the past year, even as many American companies have exited the market, the Chinese market that is, under pressure from U.S. authorities. It just seems strange to me that you're spending so much money, even as you're set to receive billions of dollars. By the way, I can't believe that you get no money from Washington, D.C. I find that hard to believe. But why is it that you are continuing to double down on the Chinese market? I mean, is this a good thing? Is it a good thing for Intel to be investing in Chinese artificial intelligence? I mean, they're our chief competitor.
The reason for our investment, Senator, is that there are unique characteristics, technologies that we can leverage so that we can build the greatest products here in the United States.
Well, yeah, I have no doubt that you're able to turn a significant profit off of what you invest in China, but how that benefits, inures to the benefit of the United States is opaque to me, not clear to me. What about your relationship with your suppliers in Xinjiang and Uyghur forced labor? Do you condemn the forced labor that the Chinese government and its suppliers use? I think maybe your mic's off.
I'm sorry, Senator. That particular question, I would leave that answer to the experts. I'm not an expert on that.
Well, wait a minute. You're not an expert on whether or not there's forced labor in China?
Correct.
Well, wait a minute. You're not willing to say here today that the Chinese are exploiting the Uyghurs?
I would leave that answer to that question to the experts.
Does it take an expert to know that there's slave labor in China? The Uyghurs are enslaved. Do you know who the Uyghurs are?
I do.
Okay. So are you willing to say that what the Chinese authorities are doing to the Uyghurs is wrong?
Sir, I'm not an expert to be able to make that
case. Good Lord. I can't believe you're saying this. And, you know, what's alarming about this is your company did the same thing. In December 2021, you issued a letter to your suppliers saying that the company is required to ensure our supply chain does not use any labor or source goods or services from the Xinjiang region. But then you apologized for it a week later on Chinese social media, saying that that letter was only written to comply with U.S. law. And now you're telling me you don't have a stance on it at all. Is that really your position?
Senator, I'm not in a position to make that statement.
You're not in a position to condemn forced labor in China?
I would condemn forced labor. I'm not an expert to be able to weigh in on whether China is engaging in such actions.
You have billions of dollars of investments in China. You are investing in Chinese artificial intelligence. You are investing in Chinese semiconductors. You are making who knows how much money in China, but you won't say that the Uyghurs being exploited is wrong? What is wrong with you people? That's not a rhetorical question. I can't believe I'm hearing this.
Personally, I believe that slave labor is wrong, yes.
Personally? Well, good. Well, I'm glad we've gotten that far. Now, why is your company associating itself with it?
I am not aware of my company's associated with it.
I cannot believe that we are sitting here having this conversation. I cannot believe that it is not easy for you to say that Intel will have nothing to do with forced labor and what the Chinese government is doing to the Uyghurs, a religious minority who are enslaved as we sit here and speak today. I can't believe that you won't just clearly say that's wrong, we condemn it, we will have nothing to do with it. This is astounding.
Senator, we do not support or tolerate our products being used in forced labor, slave labor, or child labor.
Yeah, but you just sat here and said that you don't have any idea if it's really going on in China.
But I'm not an expert in that.
It doesn't take an expert. It doesn't, everybody knows that this is the truth, right? I mean, would you give me the same answer about the Holocaust? Do you have to be an expert in that to know that it was wrong and that it happened? I mean, good Lord. I just have to tell you, I can't believe the U.S. government give you any money if this is what you're going to do with it, and this is going to be the position of your company. Let me just ask you about one other thing while I have you here. Intel is laying off, 15,000 workers now in this new plan that you've just announced, or a cost-saving plan for 2025. How many of those 15,000 workers are Americans?
Senator, I don't have a number at this point of who's being laid off. I can tell you that laying off anybody is no easy decision.
You considered all other ways of cost-cutting measures before you laid off the 15,000? Is that what you're telling me?
We are facing economic headwinds, and to be able to make sure the company is efficient, operating efficiently, we are going through a downsizing moment.
Did you think it was efficient to give your CEO a 45% pay increase year over year while you're cutting 15,000 jobs? Mr. What is it, Gelsinger, I think it is? He made $11.6 million in 2022. Now he's making $17 million. Is that an efficiency?
I'm not an expert on his salary.
Yeah. Well, you don't appear to be an expert on much, but I tell you what, it should not be hard to say that American jobs are important, American national security is important, and slave labor is wrong. And funding slave labor in China is absolutely an atrocity. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Welch, you may conclude. Thank you very much. Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Berry, let me just start with you. You said in response to a question from, I think it was Senator Graham, you praised the protests going on campuses. I just want to make sure I got this right, so you correct me now, as a national organic human rights movement. What did you mean by that?
The mass movement in support of Palestinian human rights is happening on college campuses across the country after students are learning more about the history of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and the specific targeting of Palestinian human rights. Yes.
Oh, okay. I just want to be clear about what you're praising and not praising.
Well, praising.
Let's have a look here. So,
yeah.
This long live the Intifada.
Yeah.
Is this an example of the what did you say, national organic human rights movement that you mean? Is this a human rights movement?
I'm not sure that using the term Intifada, which literally just means to shake off or get rid of, is effective. As most Americans don't actually associate it with a human rights issue, so I don't think that's effective. No, Senator?
Wait a minute. You don't think it's effective, but you would agree that this is calling for the destruction of the state of Israel. This is after the
No, Senator.
No, it's not. This isn't calling for the killing of Jews.
I don't know that person, and I don't know that sign. So
you don't know what this means?
I don't think.
You haven't seen this before? Did you see these protests on Rabbi, do you know what this means?
Yes, it's a call for the destruction of the state of Israel and probably the killing of Jews everywhere.
I do not agree with that, Senator.
You don't think that's hate speech right here?
Long live the Intifada can mean different. As I see the problem,
it can mean different things. Wait a minute. These are protests, violent protests on campuses that targeted Jewish students, attacked them personally, prevented them from going to camp, going to class, put them in fear of their safety after the October 7th attacks on the state of Israel that murdered more Jews than at any time since the Holocaust. And you're saying you think that this is an ambiguous message?
I'm saying that any student targeted on campus, a Jewish student.
Will you condemn this right here? Right here. Long live the Intifada. Will you condemn that?
Condemning Jewish students on a campus is being targeted, and the Office of Civil Rights should successfully be given funding.
Will you condemn this as hate speech?
I think that can be hate speech, but I don't think it's automatically hate speech. The problem is that there's nuance I'm trying to introduce to this conversation.
What's the nuance when these people are marching and calling for Jews to be killed?
Sir, because long intifada also means uprising for Palestinians. The way
So it's ambiguous, so it's hard to say. Well, my gosh. Okay, let's try another one. What about this?
Please, audience will please.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's fine. We know what you think. Right, exactly. I mean, I think you've made it clear. Those who were cheering earlier when Senator Cruz was asking about the attempts to destroy and kill Jews. Let's just be clear about what's going on here, because here's what's happening at this hearing. We can't talk about anti-Semitism without also talking about something else. The message that's being sent today at this hearing today is anti-Semitism isn't enough. The attempts to kill Jews on campuses, that's not a conversation worthy of discussion. You've got to add something else to it. So if you want to kill Jews, oh, well, we can't talk about that unless we also talk about 15 other things. And now we have a witness sitting here who will not condemn the attempts on these campuses that are blatantly anti-Semitic tropes, Nazi tropes to try and kill Jews. What about this one? There's only one solution. Is that a national organic human rights movement?
No, sir. I trust that's in reference to Holocaust, and that's
I would think the final solution. Okay, what about this? What about this? Glory to our martyrs.
Again, I don't understand the point of messaging like that. I don't know what that means.
Would you condemn this as anti-Semitic? This was projected here in Washington, D.C. on the campus in front of Jewish students following the October 7th massacre.
I think that is not appropriate speech at a time.
It was hate speech in the context, don't you think?
Sure, but the point is I would prefer to focus on the issue of hate crime. That's the reason I'm saying
this is a hate crime. When you threaten to kill Jews and destroy the state of Israel, that's hate speech.
No,
that's a hate crime.
Threatening to kill anyone, including Jews, let's
not pretend that it's ambivalent or ambiguous or we're not sure. How about this one? Free Palestine from the river to the sea.
That's not hate speech, sir.
You don't think that this is a call for the destruction of the state of Israel?
I can speak to what I think, which is amazing because I'd love to talk about what I think, but I really think the focus of our hearing
You don't think that after the October 7th attacks, when this was projected in front of a group of Jewish students right here in the District of Columbia, you don't think that's an attempt to intimidate them and call for the destruction of the state of Israel?
Focusing on hate crime, I would say if that were displayed on a synagogue, then it's a hate crime. If it was displayed on a Hillel, then it's a hate crime. If it's displayed elsewhere, I trust its speech.
Well, and then we wonder why our students are confused. Rabbi, let me just ask you, are you confused about this message?
I'm not confused, and I'll add that even if it was ambiguous and could mean different things to different people, Senator, can you imagine if there was a phrase that also meant kill all the black people? Would we be okay with projecting it because it might also mean something else to someone else?
No, I mean, well said, well said. I'm almost done, Mr. Chairman, but let me just ask, since the witness talked about a national human rights movement, let me just ask about a couple others. University of North Carolina chapter of Students for Justice in Palestine claimed, it is our moral obligation to be in solidarity with the dispossessed, no matter the pathway to liberation they choose to take. This includes violence. Would you condemn that?
I'm sorry, was that for me?
Yes. It is our moral obligation to be in solidarity with the dispossessed, no matter the pathway to liberation they choose to take. This includes violence. You condemn that?
I certainly condemn violence.
Good. You condemn that statement?
I condemn violence. I have no interest in engaging in this back and forth about individual statements of students.
You know what? I do have an interest in it, and here's why. What I just read to you, the United States Senate unanimously condemned this rhetoric. And unless we take a stand now on this rhetoric, on this specific rhetoric out of the mouths of these students that you have called National Organic Human Rights Movement protesters, we are going to send the message that trying to kill Jews on campus, trying to prevent Jews from going to class on campus is just okay. It's just another viewpoint.
Senator,
it's not just another viewpoint. And frankly, what you're trying to do here today, I think, is wrong.
Your time has expired.
Deeply wrong, sir.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr.
Today on this important topic, Dr. Doshi, if I could just start with you. Since 2008, the McKinsey Company has done nearly $1 billion in consulting work for the United States government. $1 billion. And its top client has been the Defense Department. In fact, it's got contracts with the Defense Department, with the U.S. Department of the Navy, with the Homeland Security Department, with Customs and Border Patrol. I think in 2021 alone, McKinsey had Defense Department or other security agency contracts worth $850 million. It's absolutely extraordinary. And yet, at the same time, they're also doing business with the Chinese government. They are simultaneously taking $1 billion from the United States and its security agencies and also getting money from not just China in general, from the Chinese government and Chinese-controlled entities. Explain to us why that is a problem. I think any normal American who's sitting out there and hears that would be absolutely outraged by it, and rightly so. Why are they getting taxpayer money advising our military and simultaneously advising the Chinese military? But just explain to us, why is this a national security concern?
Well, thank you, Senator Hawley. I agree this is a national security concern. I would go further. I mean, the nature of the work that McKinsey did reportedly involved helping China consider how to outcompete U.S. technology firms, how to strengthen Made in China 2025. The goal was to help them advance their goals for technological dominance. And that is directly at odds with the interests not just of the U.S. government, but also of the corporate clients they had in the United States that they were also advising. So there's a clear conflict of interest there. And it's also, the kind of conflict of interest that even if McKinsey had exercised better judgment about the projects it took on, other firms doing business in China are getting raided by the Chinese government. Oftentimes, that means that their data is no longer secure. And if they have U.S. client data on those servers, well, that's now Chinese data. So there's a lot of concerns, I think, that we can raise here. One is the nature of the work. Another is being a vector for the transfer of information and data. And there's a third concern, too, which is that some of these firms have mutually irreconcilable obligations to the United States and to China. China is basically saying, if you want to comply with the subpoena from this committee, you can't, because we have a data security law saying you can. That's three different kinds of conflicts beyond the one, Senator, that you just identified.
Well, that's terrific. As we think about the different things that McKinsey has advised China on, they are, for example, a major proponent and promoter of China's Belt and Road Initiative. So here they are, again, taking $1 billion in contracts from the United States military, simultaneously advising China on their Belt and Road Initiative, which is meant to undermine our military and also to undermine American companies all across the world. McKinsey has advised 9 of the top 15 Chinese contractors for the Belt and Road Initiative as of 2018. I mean, it's shameless when you think about it. It is absolutely shameless. Interestingly, I recently obtained a document related to a contract, just to give one example, involving semiconductors. So semiconductors, McKinsey entered into a contract with the U.S. government, our Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, DARPA, in 2021 related to semiconductors. The DoD asked McKinsey if there was any conflict that they might have with the Chinese government. According to these documents recently released to me pursuant to a FOIA request, McKinsey submitted documentation that said that there were no conflicts at all. And in fact, as we now know, they were simultaneously advising the Chinese government on a very similar project. I mean, this to me, it seems like such common sense. The chairman and I wrote to the GAO asking for an analysis of the conflict of interest law and analysis of the procurement and contract awarding process to see if there were any strictures, limitations in current law that would prevent companies like McKinsey from simultaneously making billions from the United States and making billions on China. That report has just come back just a couple of days ago. And what it shows is that there are no such restrictions in United States law currently, which is why our legislation, the Time to Choose Act, which the chairman and I co-sponsored together, introduced and passed this committee almost unanimously, I think only one no vote, is so important because it would prevent what we see on this poster behind me. Ms. Teltman, do you want to add to this why this sort of common sense set of restrictions telling consulting firms you can't consult for the U.S. government and rake in billions from American taxpayers and consult for our chief adversary at the same time, why this is important and why it's a matter of national security?
Thank you, Senator. I read that GAO report, and I join you in your concern about the lack of laws and guidance right now currently guiding contracting officials on this issue. One thing I will note is that the FAR provisions related to conflicts of interest are quite broad and could capture some of this, but most government officials won't feel comfortable taking this sort of action without greater guidance and directives explicitly giving them comfort that they can look to in taking these sorts of actions. I share similar concerns as you. I get nervous when things are too restrictive and there's too many absolutes, but you raise very good points about why contracting officials need better laws and need to be empowered to make these types of decisions.
Yeah, very good. Mr. Riley, let me just ask you, because your exchange with Senator Paul I thought was illuminating. You said that there's a continuum between banning everything on the one end and then everything goes on the other end. So I take it from your testimony today, you're on the anything goes side of the spectrum.
No.
So you support this bill then?
As I mentioned in my comments earlier, we support the goals, but we're concerned that it leads to a slippery slope potentially. We 100% support legislation that would advance our national security and protect our national security. I will say, based on the conversation I've heard this morning, if these companies are giving China advice, either they're giving pretty bad advice or China's not taking it very well because their economy is on the downhill slide instead of going up. If they are legitimate...
Well, wait a minute. They're on the march in the Pacific. McKinsey advised them on building out islands in the South China Sea. At the same time, it was getting defense contracts. So I guess, is your position that you are opposed to, you want companies to be able to get taxpayer money from the United States and simultaneously get money from the Chinese government? That's fine?
My concern, Senator, is how do you differentiate between that, how you draw the line between that, and a soybean farmer, which depends on China for its exports and simultaneously...
The soybean farmer isn't advising the Chinese military on how to take over the United States. I come from a state where our #1 agricultural product is soybeans.
Right.
We are a state of soybean farmers, and I can tell you, I think they would take great offense to you comparing them to a consulting firm that is taking $1 billion in money from the United States military while simultaneously advising the Chinese military on how to harm the United States. Are you saying that soybean farmers harm the security interests of the United States? I think that's a ridiculous position.
As I said, with respect to 232 national security legislation, it starts out here. The next thing you know, we're restricting trade with the UK, with Israel, with our allies.
That's not
how do you know that's not going to happen again? That's all I'm asking. We need to have guardrails to make sure that our soybean farmers and other producers aren't harmed like we have been in recent years by our trade
I think that's the most, frankly, absurd instance of whataboutism. It makes just listening to you say it refutes itself.
I'm not talking about hypotheticals. I'm talking about what has actually happened, and I don't want to see that repeat.
You're talking about something that is not in this bill, and you're equating soybean farmers with a consulting firm that is advising the Chinese military. It's absolutely absurd.
I'm equating national
security. And here
security.
you are opposing, in the name of, you represented taxpayers, you are here testifying in favor, apparently, of allowing a company to take tax money. This is tax money. This is $1 billion in taxpayer money McKinsey is raking in, while also going to our chief adversary, selling our secrets essentially, and making money from them. What could be worse for the American taxpayer? I can't think of anything, which is why this bill passed overwhelmingly in this committee. And I thank you all for your testimony today. Thank you, Senator Peters, again, for your hard work on this and support. I appreciate it, and thanks for holding this hearing.
Well, I appreciate your leadership on the issue as well, Senator. Senator Hassan, you're